Welcome back. Last time we got this system working so that our Bob sprite was going back and forth, it falls with gravity, but also it can jump between platforms. And in this video we want to make it so that Bob has something to do. So I'm going to go and put in a picture of, let's say, a watermelon, because that was one of the sprites that I have in my directory. Okay, and just as before, I'm going to just delete that here. So now that I have this in my code, in my playground, I need to think about my strategy. I could just add a watermelon to every location that I want Bob to go to in order to pick up fruit. Like, he needs a challenge. But I'm pretty sure I want Bob to not just collect one watermelon, but a whole bunch of watermelons. When you find yourself wanting to create multiple sprites that all have the same properties, this is where you create something called a class. And I've added the class to this project already, so let's take a look and see how it works. Inside the shared code.swift, I've imported SpriteKit and I've added this code. A lot of this should look the same as other sprites that we put together. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to make it so that I define the properties that every single watermelon I put on the screen will have. There's a lot going on here and you don't have to understand everything. This line is probably the most important one that you're going to have to add in there, and I will make this code available to you so you don't have to just type it yourself. You can see I am naming the watermelon image that I just added to my playground. I'm giving it a color that is clear. Most of the time when you do this, you'll do the same. And I'm giving it this size. My image is a square, so I'm just defining this variable called fruit size, and I'm creating a size that has the width and the height that is that size. Everything here is something you've actually done before. You've set properties on a sprite. I'm setting its dimensions. I'm creating a physics body. I'm saying it's dynamic. I'm saying that this is not going to allow rotation. And it also needs this other bit of code in there, which, to be honest, I don't entirely understand myself. Now that I've created this, and I'm going to go to did move, and I'm just going to add a new sprite to the screen. And this sprite is going to be one of my new fruit sprites. All right, that should do it. Let's run the code. And so you can see that it places that fruit up above. I can kind of interact with it, push it around, and it has physics just like every other sprite that's in the game. I could do this again and make new fruit 2 is equal to fruit, new fruit 2 equal, dot position is that, maybe slide it over so that's at 150, run the code, and now I have 2 fruits. I could do that. What I'd like to do instead is show you how, with a for loop, we can actually create a whole bunch of fruit all at once. So let me add that code to the screen and then we'll talk about it. So I am creating a for loop, and I'm using this function called stride, which essentially allows me to define a range in a really useful way. So imagine I want to go from an x-coordinate of 80 all the way over to 480 in my scene, and I want to skip by 60 units. So I'm going to create a new fruit. I'm going to set its position where the x-coordinate is going to be I, and the y-coordinate is going to be 400. And then I add child. I'm going to add that to the screen. When I run the code, it is now adding a whole bunch of these watermelons to the scene at every one of those locations. If I want there to be even more of these, I could say let's count by, how about 40 instead, and it'll do the exact same thing. So many watermelons on the screen. And you know, again, these all have physics. So it's kind of fun to just kind of move them around, and I am realizing I am missing something incredibly important. When the Bob sprite collides with one of the watermelons, I want to increase the score, but we don't have a sprite for the score yet, so we have to add that. Let's put that in. All right, so first thing, I'm creating a variable called current score. I'm making it var because the score is going to change over time, and I'm creating the score sprite so that it just has a default score to begin with. And I am setting its position and adding the sprite to the scene. Okay, crisis averted. There's my score. We're ready to go. Now we get into a tricky concept. We are going to be using the didBegin function all the way down here to manage our collisions. And I'm actually going to remove this code because we're going to build this from scratch. We want to be able to keep track of collisions anytime the Bob sprite collides with a fruit sprite. So we're going to define what's called a category up top. So these are binary numbers. I'm just defining two of them. One for Bob. Let me do this. So I have one category for Bob, one category for fruit. The next thing I need to do for my Bob sprite is I need to actually give it that category through the physics body. Okay, so this is how I set the category bit mask to be Bob category. There's a second thing that I need to do. I want to know anytime the Bob sprite, which has this Bob category, contacts a fruit sprite. So I'm going to set another property on the Bob sprite. And this is the contact test bit mask, which means I'm interested in knowing when Bob sprite is in contact with anything from the fruit category. When the Bob sprite contacts fruit category, I want a message, I want to run that didBegin function. Now there's something missing in the fruit category because I haven't actually set the fruit category on the fruit. So let's do that now. Okay, so we're ready to go on that. Let's now go down to the didBegin function. So we know the didBegin function runs when there is contact between two sprites. Whenever two sprites interact, there are always two of those sprites. One SpriteKit names body A, the other one body B. You don't necessarily know which one is body B and which one is body A, so you have to do some logic to figure out exactly which one is which. The first thing I'm going to do is define some variables to simplify the typing. So by writing body A here and body B there, I won't have to type this every single time I want to check properties on each of those two sprites that are involved in the collision. The next thing that I want to do is I want to figure out what kind of contact type has occurred. And the reason I'm doing that is there could be multiple contact types within your game, and there are going to be in this game because ultimately I want to add an enemy here. So the way we figure out what kind of contact this is I'm looking at the category bit mask on body A and the category bit mask on body B. If I've set my categories right, this is going to allow me to determine, is it the Bob colliding with fruit? Is it Bob colliding with an enemy? Because I want very different things happening in both of those cases. So this variable is going to store the type of contact that has just occurred based on what body A and body B are. I'm defining the type of contact I'm interested in right now as a variable called Bob touches fruit, and I'm saying I want to compare what's happening with Bob category and fruit categories. And it's the information I need to know if Bob has contacted fruit. Finally, what I'm doing is I'm checking to see if the contact type, based on body A and body B, is equal to this other category that I've made that specifically highlights when Bob has touched fruit. And so I'm saying if the contact type means Bob touches fruit, I want to print a message that just says Bob touched fruit. This is to debug and make sure everything is working the way I want it before I start playing around with the score. So the moment of truth. I'm going to show the console, and there we go. So you can see there that every time I touch fruit, notice I push it away and I touch it again, I'm getting that message that Bob touched fruit. And it actually happens anytime I touch any of the fruits in the game. Now that I know that's working, how do I change the score when that occurs? And I want to remove the fruit from the scene so that they don't get all bunched up like you see is happening there. I'm going to remove my print statement. This we get. We're going to increase the score by 10. We're going to update the text in the score sprite. And then this is the one that's tricky. Again, I don't know whether body A is the fruit or body B is the fruit. So I need to figure out which one is the fruit. And the way I'm checking that is by looking at the category bit mask and comparing it to the fruit category. If body A has the fruit category, then it means that body A is the fruit, and so this right here removes body A from the game. If that's not the case, I know that body B is the fruit, and so I'm going to remove body B from the game. Let's check and make sure everything is now working. There we go. Contacted, score goes up by 10, fruit disappears. Another one, another one, another one. All right, we have contacts are working, and I've scored 100 points. We've done a lot here in figuring out the contact events, adding a score, adding fruit to our scene. In the next video, in our remake of Bubble Bobble, we're gonna put the enemy onto the screen and put on the finishing touches so that all of this is working as close to the original as possible. See you there.